If you speak to yourself in private, what psychology says, sometimes the hardest conversations don't happen with other people. They happen when you're alone, late at night replaying a moment you wish you'd handled differently. You whisper a sentence to yourself, then another, and suddenly you stop because you wonder if something is wrong with you for doing that. I've caught myself doing it too, especially when I feel overwhelmed or stuck. Talking quietly to myself in the kitchen, in the car, in the dark. It feels private, almost embarrassing, yet strangely necessary. Psychology doesn't see this habit as weakness. It sees it as the mind trying to organize itself. As Daniel Kahneman wrote in Thinking Fast and Slow, nothing in life is as important as you think it is while you are thinking about it. That inner voice, spoken out loud, can slow your thoughts down, giving your brain a chance to regain balance. When you speak to yourself in private, it may not be a problem at all. It may be how you survive your own thoughts. Number 1. Self-talk as a tool for emotional regulation. When emotions rise and no one else is present, self-talk often steps in as a quiet stabilizer. Speaking thoughts out loud slows emotional intensity by giving the nervous system something predictable to follow. Language. I felt this myself in moments of tension. When saying what I feel helps my body release its grip before my mind even catches up. Psychology describes this as emotional regulation in real time. James Gross, in his foundational paper, Emotion Regulation, Conceptual and Empirical Foundations, defines emotion regulation as the processes by which individuals influence which emotions they have, when they have them, and how they experience and express these emotions. Self-talk is one of those processes, especially when emotions are raw and unfiltered. By naming feelings, frustration, fear, uncertainty, you reduce their power to flood the system. The brain shifts from pure emotional reactivity to reflective processing. This is why calm self-talk can lower stress, slow breathing, and restore balance. It isn't denial, it's containment. When you speak to yourself with steadiness instead of urgency, your emotional system receives a signal of safety. Over time, this practice trains resilience. You're no longer waiting for external reassurance to settle down. You're learning how to offer it internally, in your own voice, at the moment it's needed most. Number 2. The inner voice and self-awareness. Self-awareness begins with noticing what's happening inside you, and self-talk often becomes the bridge between feeling and understanding. When you speak your thoughts aloud, you're not just reacting, you're observing yourself in motion. I've noticed that this creates a subtle distance between me and my emotions, enough to understand them without being swallowed by them. Psychologist Daniel Goleman explains in Emotional Intelligence that self-awareness, recognizing a feeling as it happens, is the keystone of emotional intelligence. Talking to yourself makes that recognition clearer and more immediate. This inner voice helps you detect emotional patterns you might otherwise ignore. You begin to hear recurring themes: self-doubt, hope, fear, resolve, and recognize where they come from. That awareness builds choice. Instead of being driven unconsciously by emotion, you start responding with intention. Healthy self-talk doesn't amplify ego. It deepens insight. It allows you to name what you need, what hurts, and what matters, without distortion. Over time, this habit strengthens your relationship with yourself. You become less reactive, more grounded, and more honest, because you're finally listening to the one voice that has been there all along. Number 3. When self-talk becomes self-compassion. There is a clear psychological line between self-talk that heals and self-talk that harms. When your inner voice speaks with patience instead of punishment, it becomes self-compassion in action. I've noticed that the moments I speak to myself most gently are usually the moments I'm struggling the most. Psychology supports this instinct. Carl Rogers, one of the founders of humanistic psychology, wrote in On Becoming a Person, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." Self-talk rooted in acceptance creates emotional safety, and safety is what allows growth. Compassionate self-talk doesn't excuse mistakes. It creates space to learn from them. When you speak to yourself as you would to someone you care about, shame loosens its grip. This kind of inner dialogue reduces anxiety, softens self-criticism, and builds emotional resilience. Over time, your nervous system learns that difficulty doesn't mean danger, it means adjustment. In that sense, kind self-talk isn't weakness, it's emotional strength, practiced quietly, one sentence at a time. Number 4. Talking to yourself as cognitive processing. Self-talk is not only emotional, it's cognitive. Speaking thoughts out loud helps the brain organize information that feels tangled internally. I've experienced this during moments of indecision, when a problem feels overwhelming, until I start explaining it to myself. Psychology recognizes this as a thinking strategy. Lev Vygotsky explained in Thinking and Speech that language is not just a communication tool but a structure for thought itself. When thoughts are spoken, they become clearer, more manageable, and easier to evaluate. This is why people often talk themselves through tasks, choices, or complex emotions. Verbalizing ideas reduces mental overload and improves focus. The mind moves from vague tension to structured reasoning. Self-talk slows thinking down, just enough for logic and insight to step in. Instead of spiraling internally, you're processing externally, even if no one else hears it. In that moment, talking to yourself is not distraction. It's the mind doing exactly what it was designed to do, make sense of the world, one word at a time. Number 5. The link between solitude and inner growth. Self-talk often deepens in solitude, not because something is missing, but because distractions finally fall away. When you're alone, there is space to hear yourself clearly. I've found that some of my most honest realizations arrive in quiet moments, spoken softly, without an audience. Psychology sees solitude not as withdrawal, but as a context for inner development. Donald Winnicott wrote in The Capacity to Be Alone that the capacity to be alone is one of the most important signs of emotional maturity. Talking to yourself in solitude is often a sign that this capacity is present. In these moments, self-talk becomes a form of reflection, rather than reaction. You begin to sort experiences, integrate emotions, and make meaning out of what you've lived through. Solitude gives the mind permission to slow down and process without interruption. Over time, this strengthens psychological independence. You become less reliant on constant external input to understand yourself. Growth happens quietly here, not through dramatic insight, but through repeated moments of listening inward and responding with honesty. Number 6. High emotional intelligence and inner dialogue. Now, people with high emotional intelligence often have a well-developed inner dialogue. They don't just feel emotions, they interpret them. I've noticed that talking to myself helps me pause before reacting, especially in emotionally charged situations. According to Daniel Goleman in Emotional Intelligence, emotionally intelligent individuals are able to manage their feelings so that they are expressed appropriately and effectively. Self-talk plays a crucial role in that management. Through inner dialogue, emotions are named, examined, and guided rather than suppressed. This creates better boundaries, clearer communication, and greater empathy, both for oneself and others. When you regularly talk to yourself, you're rehearsing emotional clarity. You're practicing how to respond instead of react. Over time, this inner conversation becomes more balanced, more grounded, and more wise. Emotional intelligence grows not from silence, but from learning how to speak to yourself with awareness and restraint. Number 7. Transforming your inner voice into an ally. The most important shift in self-talk is not whether it exists, but how it sounds. The inner voice can either drain you or support you, often using the same words with a different tone. I've realized that when I slow down and choose my words carefully, my inner dialogue becomes less reactive and more guiding. Psychology shows that this is a learnable skill. Aaron T. Beck, founder of cognitive therapy, wrote in Cognitive Therapy and the Emotional Disorders that the way an individual perceives and interprets events determines his emotional response. Self-talk shapes that interpretation moment by moment. By gently questioning harsh thoughts and replacing them with realistic, grounded language, the inner voice shifts from critic to companion. This doesn't mean forced positivity. It means accuracy and fairness. Over time, your inner voice begins to anticipate challenges with steadiness instead of fear. It becomes a private source of encouragement, helping you regulate emotions, make decisions, and recover faster from setbacks. When self-talk becomes an ally, you stop fighting yourself and start moving forward with quiet confidence. Conclusion: when the voice you hear becomes a source of strength, talking to yourself when you're alone is not a sign of disconnection from the world, but a sign of connection to yourself. It reflects a mind that is processing, regulating, and learning how to stay present through emotion. I've come to see this inner dialogue as evidence of growth, not isolation. Psychology consistently shows that awareness begins internally, and language is often the bridge. As Carl Rogers noted in On Becoming a Person, "What I am is good enough if I would only be it openly." Self-talk allows that openness to happen in private, where honesty feels safest. When the inner voice is patient and grounded, it becomes a stabilizing force in daily life. It helps you respond instead of react, reflect instead of avoid, and care instead of criticize. Over time, this quiet conversation shapes emotional resilience and self-trust. The voice you hear when no one else is around may be the one teaching you how to live with clarity, compassion, and strength from the inside out.